You know, when you think of the Sonic franchise, most people often turn their sights to Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. They are the original trio, Team Sonic. Now, we've seen a crap ton of Sonic and Tails recently, so what the hell happened to Knuckles? Knuckles was one of my all-time favorite characters from the series, but much like Shadow, his misinterpretation led him down a dark path of poor writing and terrible character decisions. He used to be one of the biggest characters in the franchise that, over time, has been reduced to nothing more than a character in the background, accomplishing nothing except being another subject of the comedy of the franchise. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Let's just start from the beginning and work up to the crap that comes later. Knuckles the Echidna was first introduced in Sonic 3 as a rival to Sonic. As you go through the game playing as Sonic, you find that Knuckles constantly gets in your way and impedes your progress. He is seen only as somebody who's working with Eggman to stop you. That's all you needed to know. It wasn't until Sonic and Knuckles came out that we were able to get more depth on his character. Thanks to the magic of
lock-on technology!
We got Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the complete experience telling the whole story. We learned that Knuckles is tasked with guarding the Master Emerald and that Eggman tricked him into believing that Sonic wants to take the Emerald for himself. That's why Knuckles acted as the antagonist to Sonic. And people call him dumb for listening to Eggman, but can you blame him? He has been alone and secluded on an island doing nothing but guarding this emerald for his whole life. Of course he would be naive and listen to Eggman. He wants nothing more than to protect the emerald and fulfill his duty no matter what. And then what happens halfway through? Eggman betrays Knuckles and takes the Master Emerald for himself. But Knuckles doesn't just sit there wallowing in self-pity, he immediately springs into action in order to get his emerald back. He starts working with Sonic instead of against him, culminating in the return of the emerald to Angel Island. It's a simple enough story, but I'm genuinely impressed with how much they were able to display about Knuckles' character and his growth in a 90s platformer with no dialogue. It really proves that you can say a lot by showing instead of telling. But this game gave us insight into Knuckles' character. He's a strong-willed, determined, and formidable person with a slight naivete about him who would do anything to fulfill his ancestral duty of guarding the emerald. He has never been evil, he only did what he did because he thought that was the right thing to do. That's it. If there's one thing that I do love about this game, aside from pretty much everything about it, it's that it goes out of its way to show you that Knuckles is a strong and capable character. The first time that we see him at all in the game is when he appears out of the ground and punches Sonic out of his super state, before taking the emeralds and escaping. How many Sonic characters do you know could knock Sonic straight out of his super form in their base form? Yeah, that's what I thought. As well as this, he's also got a super form of his own, showing that his connection to the emeralds is on a similar level to Sonic, which conveniently also helps to build on that rivalry that they have. It's too bad that it now has been officially confirmed that in the games only male hedgehogs can have super forms. Wow, is that sexism and racism bundled into one? Huh. I hate it when important stuff like these super forms that only add to Knuckles' character is all of a sudden just retconned. But I'll have a whole video discussing super forms and my thoughts on them. But it wasn't until the adventure games that we started to gain more depth with this character. In Adventure 1, Knuckles gets his own story. It's here where he begins to question who he is and why he was born with the job of guarding the emerald. Through this, we learn that he actually has no idea why he's doing this. He was just born shouldering the responsibility of an entire race that is presumed extinct. But all of a sudden, chaos appears, shattering the Master Emerald and scattering the shards across the land. After this encounter, it becomes his mission to travel to all these different areas in order to find the shards and restore the emerald. Just the pure willingness to travel these long distances in order to collect these shards of the emerald does show Knuckles' determination. He even acknowledges to himself that this is not an easy feat.
It's up to me to find the missing pieces of the Master Emerald. It won't be easy. Pieces flew off everywhere. Guess I better start looking anywhere I can.
But early on, Knuckles is once again tricked by Eggman into thinking that Sonic is collecting the Master Emerald. People seem to really hate this, believing that it's just a repeat of Sonic 3, and to an extent it kinda is, but let me explain why I don't think it's that bad. Although it is pretty bad, don't get me wrong. Firstly, he doesn't outright team up with Eggman again like he did previously. He has learned that Eggman is the villain. So then you ask, why would he trust anything that Eggman says? Well, that's because, as previously stated, this is a difficult task, so he would grasp at any of the leads possible, no matter how thin, in order to find the pieces. On top of that, he still isn't clear of his naive nature, so even if he didn't want to believe Eggman, there's always the chance that he would. It's clear through some of his writing that Knuckles still doesn't excel at social situations, most likely due to his isolation. You have to understand that he is an introverted character. He's been secluded to that island for pretty much his whole life without any social interactions at all. Although, to me, it didn't make much sense why he would immediately attack Sonic without even trying to talk to him. I mean, from the dialogue in the last few cutscenes before the fight, it seems as though that was his intention. But then he just starts throwing hands with him. I figured that they would have a mutual understanding of each other after the events of 3 and Knuckles, but I guess it does serve to show that he still carries traits from that game. And he still does end up working with Sonic after figuring out that he was tricked, so yeah. I mean, all in all, repeating this trope from Sonic 3 is kind of lazy, and it probably could have been reworked to have a better reason as to why he would fight Sonic, but what's done is done. As well as this, Knuckles also bears witness to a bunch of flashbacks of his people. Through this, he sees what happened to the Echidna tribe, but doesn't have a full understanding of it all. And by the end of his campaign, he decides that he's better off not knowing about his people or their history. He just wants things to continue as they are and to be oblivious to his past.
I'll probably be on this floating island forever. Guarding the Master Emerald again. I may not know the whole story behind this, but perhaps it's better that way. I'm at peace once more.
This, for me anyways, was a very interesting ending that aided his character development. I interpret it as him being scared of finding out the truth for fear of losing the will to carry out his duty in protecting the Emerald. But that's just how I see it. Now, moving on to Adventure 2, his character begins to change again. Not in any major way, but he does begin to soften up and act a bit more relaxed. His story begins with a confrontation with Rouge the Bat, who is a jewel thief that wants to add the Master Emerald to her collection. But amidst their bickering, Eggman appears and takes the emerald, and Knuckles decides to shatter the emerald in order to prevent Eggman from getting it. In my opinion, this was a pretty bad way of shoehorning in the treasure hunting gameplay from SA1. But Knuckles does play an important role later in the story where the Master Emerald is used to neutralize the Chaos Emerald's power, so I guess I can forgive it. Much like SA1, his parts of the story are separated from the rest of the guys a lot of the time, but he does end up working with them quite a bit and doesn't really show any resistance in doing so, playing into that whole relaxed attitude that I mentioned earlier. And one big reason for that slight character shift is Rouge the Bat. They start off disliking each other as the Master Emerald poses as a conflict of interest, but as the game goes on, you start to see more of a relationship form. Even after Knuckles saves Rouge, there seems to be some kind of romantic tension there, ending with Rouge returning the shards to Knuckles and cracking a little smile. But even more than that, you get insights into his character and thought process through his rap songs that play during the levels. Well, there's a sentence I never thought I'd say. The lyrics here are pretty much spoken from Knuckles' point of view, and they are comparatively more relaxed in tone compared to the tracks from SA1. Here's some stand-up parts from the tracks that I found. Give them a listen.
Yeah, Rouge, she's sexy and smooth. A double-cross my thief, that's out for my Jews. I'm feeling her in mysterious ways. That's why I stay on point like every single day. I gotta protect this place, I do it for my race. Makes you wanna sit back, enjoy the life, and do things you like doing, get to shine. It's your beast fighting with the foes all the time, but I gotta do it, they always stay out of line. Sometimes I wanna just chill and land, but I'm the protector of the emeralds and gems. I stay shot to space and left from our homes. At least we're friends, and I'm not all alone.
But all of this doesn't mean that he's just fully laid back all the time. He's still dutiful to his role as the Guardian, to a point where it can obstruct the others' progress. There's a scene where the Master Emerald shards are released into space, and then Knuckles wrestles with Sonic for the controls of the ship in order to get them back, causing the ship to crash land. It's a nice way of letting us know that he's still grounded in his purpose for being here, that being the Master Emerald. And there's a scene later where Sonic barely escapes death after being shot out in that capsule, and Knuckles helps him out and makes sure that he's okay, making their friendship seem more genuine. But if I do have a problem with this character in SA2, it's that he has essentially been replaced by Shadow as the rival to Sonic. Shadow's character outshined Knuckles' character to a point where his rivalry with Sonic felt obsolete. And from here on out, that rivalry is pretty much over. The Sonic X anime suffers from a similar problem wherein he starts off as Sonic's rival and then slowly dissipates from that role, especially when the Adventure 2 remake arc happens and Shadow's introduced. Aside from that slight tangent, I think we've pretty much covered Adventure 2, so let's move on to Heroes. Knuckles in Heroes has pretty much completed his character arc. That more mellow attitude that was breaking out seems to have taken his character over. He's now at a point where he's just casually hanging out with Sonic and Tails as friends. He's not here because of the Master Emerald or Angel Island, but speaking of which, this is where one of my many issues with this future character was drummed up. It was one thing to forgo the idea of Sonic and Knuckles being rivals, but another thing entirely to forget about the existence of Angel Island and the Master Emerald. These are such a major part of his story and what helped to define his character. You just have to assume that Knuckles was perfectly fine with leaving the Master Emerald unguarded, which, I'm sorry, I don't buy. Look at his character so far. Even if he's a lot more lighthearted and easygoing, there is no way that I would believe that he would leave the Master Emerald unguarded. And this is an issue that permeates throughout every game from here on out. It's these sort of criticisms that make people wonder why my favorite game is Heroes. But yeah, as I was saying, he's hanging out with his friends, cracking some one-liners, and generally being a lot more laid back. Compare this to Sonic 3 or Adventure 1, where his only goal was to be the guardian of the Master Emerald and nothing more, and you can see how his character has grown. And with that ending cutscene, they still continue on with that playful relationship between Rouge and Knuckles. But unfortunately, this is the last time where you'll see any sort of real development or continuity in that area. So from these games here, we get a sense of Knuckles, his character, and his growth. We know that he's a strong, dutiful, and almost militaristic character who bears the burden of a race he's never known and embraces it. He had a naive edge, but he's never been a bad person, only misguided by the real villain. But as he begins to interact more and more with others, he learns to soften up and take it a bit easier. He still has his priorities, but it no longer overbears his personality, and Heroes mark the end of his character development by having him reach an even further point than this. So, now what happens with his character? You would assume that the writers would just keep his character consistent through the games, but no. The most consistent thing about these Sonic games are their inconsistencies. Somehow, his character manages to morph into essentially a running joke with no real effect on the story in any way. Somehow, one of the members of Team Sonic has been made to be nothing more than a background filler character. Let's look at everybody's favorite Sonic game. In 06, he was introduced by having him deliver an expository card from Eggman, and that's it. It's like the writers had no idea what to do with his character, so they just kind of forced him in and then had him fade into the background. And 06 is the game with the main introduction of Dumb Knuckles. This is evident from some of the most awkward physical comedy with him, like him being unable to catch this card or him landing square on his head after being teleported to the future.
Nani?
You know what? No. Fuck it. I'm gonna talk about this scene. This scene never made any sense to me even as a child. You have Sonic landing perfectly fine and then have Tails and Knuckles fail to land? Tails can fly and Knuckles can glide and climb walls and somehow they fail to stick the landing. Wouldn't it have made more sense to have Tails grab Sonic as they're falling and then fly down whilst Knuckles glides or climbs down? I feel like that would have fit their characters much better and would not have portrayed Knuckles as just a complete dumbass. And that concludes the longest rant you've ever seen on this 5-second clip from 06. Also, remember how I said that Heroes was the last time that Rouge's relationship received any development? Well, that's all but confirmed here, as now there only seems to be hatred, or at least a rivalry stemmed from that. It's not even a playful rivalry like it once was. It's as though that tiny bit of Knuckles' character was regressed to the beginning of his story in Adventure 2, and nothing else. But speaking of Knuckles not playing a role in the stories, this is consistent with games like Sonic Rush, where he's just there to break down this boulder, and nothing else. This is where I can praise games like Rush Adventure and Unleashed, as they chose to remove his character from the game, knowing that he wouldn't really have a role to play. I'm sure if the original stories had been tweaked, Knuckles could have been added, but as the games are now, if he was just put in, it would have him sit on the sidelines like in Generations, just giving half-assed tips all the time. And just to bring this up now, I don't count Secret Rings and Black Knight as having appearances of Knuckles. Even though they do reuse the character and voice actor, you have to remember that these were different characters entirely. In Secret Rings, he was Sinbad, and in Black Knight, he was Sir Gawain. Just getting that out of the way now. I also just want to say that the first two Riders games were a step in the right direction. It's not perfect, but they don't make him out to be a bumbling idiot. That's this fella's job. You have Knuckles doing things like translating ancient texts and having his own rivalry with Storm. He still brings that hot-headedness to the table, but it's really not that bad at all. So with all that said, let's talk about the 2010s.
Alright, let's get this absurd character assassination over with, shall we?
Knuckles didn't appear in Colors. Good start. In Generations though, he was there and does nothing except for being frozen along with the rest of the extended cast just so Sonic can save him. And what happens when he's saved? He just stands there by Sky Sanctuary giving level tips. He isn't really a dumbass here, granted, but he's only here to be a cheerleader and nothing more. He even gets whacked away by Amy right at the end of the game for no real purpose other than to have a reason to laugh at him. Yeah, there's your Master Emerald Guardian right there. In Lost World, he has the most minor of appearances as a background character to a background character. In the calls that are made between Sonic and Amy, he's just in the background acting like a doofus, being used, again, for that awkward physical comedy. Like here, where he's just being carried away by the animals. He also achieved the full hot-headed stereotype where he just gets pissy with Sonic for no justifiable reason and tries to act better than him in every way.
Just the one container he tossed off his Eggmobile.
Wait a minute, just the one? Weak. I would have gotten them all back by now.
Save the rest of them!
Next we have Forces, which, to be fair, doesn't have him being useless in the background, but instead decided to make him into a war general and the leader of the Resistance. No, I'm not kidding. Now, Knuckles, after Sonic's supposed death, seems to be playing into that role quite well. He's not a tertiary character like in previous games, and no, wait, he gets pushed into the background just as soon as Sonic is saved. And Sonic is saved after the 4th act. Huh. It doesn't help that a good chunk of his writing here is just laughably bad, making you, once again, not take him seriously, even when you're supposed to. But then, there's the mother of all stereotypes for the character, and that is Knuckles in Sonic Boom. Boom Knuckles is what you get when you lean into a stereotype way too hard. He's actually just a complete meathead here. The poor bastard can't even tell his right from his left.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
In the Boom games, I didn't really find his writing to be very funny or good in any way, which is strange considering that I actually quite like Dumb Knuckles in the Boom TV show. Okay, wait, before you go and attack my comment section, let me explain. Unlike the game writers, the TV writers are actually pretty good, and Knuckles can genuinely be a very entertaining character.
It all comes down to this one penalty kick. Can the young woman break the glass ceiling and prove once and for all that a female can be just as good an athlete as a male?
You know, Amy, anytime someone calls attention to the breaking of gender rules, it ultimately undermines the concept of gender equality by implying that this is an exception and not the status quo. What? Just because I'm a meathead doesn't mean I'm not a feminist.
But the reason I can accept it is because the Boom universe is a separate universe to the main series. The only problem is that the general audience who view the TV show would be under the impression that the character of Boom Knuckles is the same as the one in the games, which unfortunately has been kind of true with recent titles. So Boom Knuckles as a separate character to the main series is fine, but when he influences the main series in any way, that is where I draw the line. So it's looking pretty bleak for Knuckles right now. His character that was defined since his inception has all but been left behind, and what we've been left with is a hollow shell of who his character once was. Is there even anything now that gets his character at least somewhat right? Well, yes, it's the IDW comics. God, I feel like a broken record here, but this incarnation of Knuckles is the closest we've gotten to his actual character in recent memory. He is somewhere between Adventure 2 and Heroes in terms of his characterization. It's not perfect, but it's some pretty solid stuff. Plus, they actively acknowledge the Master Emerald and actually have Knuckles guarding it, showing that Knuckles is still dutiful to his purpose, thank God. It's stuff like this that can allow me to comfortably recommend the IDW comics to Sonic fans. But that's really all there is to say. It is devastating to see an awesome character like Knuckles being mishandled like this, all for the sake of some cheap comedy just to keep the 3-year-olds entertained. He was such an awesome character with a genuinely interesting backstory of not only his character, but the Echidna tribe. Even with more recent entries like Team Sonic Racing, his character still isn't right. He isn't a pure idiot, but now he's just a hothead who doesn't trust anything or anybody. It's like the game writers actively feel the need to lean so hard into one stereotype of the character, and the only reason that I can fathom as to why they would even do this is just because it's simpler to write. Either he's really dumb over here, or he's a war general here, or he's a hothead here. You know, it just doesn't mesh well. Knuckles is not a simple, one-dimensional character. He never was. He was a complex, introverted character who struggled between what it meant to be the guardian of the Master Emerald, and to be more than that. I just hope that they can get his character right in the games again, but as always, only time will tell. Well, thank you all for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, you know, if you want to. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Push the big red button. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers, and I have something huge planned for when I hit that milestone, so stay tuned for that. But with all that said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Oh no,